got it, Mike.
All right, hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Dang it, wrong tagline. Sorry about that. Hey, how's everybody doing? This is my first ever live Q&A. So many of you have been asking me to do this for years, and I thought, well, you know, what the heck? Let's just do it, and we can help use it to raise funds for 2021. So get your super chats, and the super chat money will help the Inspiring Philosophy Ministries to create videos for the upcoming year. So thanks everyone for coming out. We got a lot of questions on already. So I'm going to introduce Marlon Wilson. He can come on in now. He's helping me tonight to go through the questions. He has a YouTube channel called The Gospel Truth. I highly recommend you check it out. I've been on there for several debates. He does a lot of debates on there. So go and check it out. I really appreciate all the help he's doing with me tonight. He's going to go through the questions and help moderate tonight. So I appreciate that. So thanks, Marlon.
Oh, no problem, no problem. So we're going to jump into this, man. As you know, Mike, also known as Inspired Philosophy, has done great work for the body of Christ, man. And he does all these edifying videos, all these videos that has a strong educational aspects to it. And it is our job as believers to make sure that we're helping other brothers and sisters succeed in the body of Christ. And that's what we're looking for today. Michael has a funding that he needs to have accomplished for the year 2021. And we're going to do everything we can tonight in order to make sure we are helping him continue to make the videos that he is creating. If he inspired you to move farther, and work harder for the body of Christ through these videos, why not show that gratitude? Why not show that appreciation for what he's doing and help fund his ministry? All right. So we're gonna jump. Before we jump to the questions, Mike wants to go over a couple of upcoming videos that he has coming up. So we're gonna go into that first, and then we'll get into these questions. All right, Mike, you got it.
So we got 3 things coming up. I just want to cover tomorrow. Come back to my channel around 2:30 p.m. Mountain Time or 4:30 p.m. I'm premiering a video, The Lost Messages of the Bible. I have been working on this script for probably about 18 months, rewriting it. A lot of donors said they've already enjoyed it, brought some of them to tears, which I really appreciate. So come back tomorrow. We're going to be premiering that 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. That'd be 1:30 Pacific Time. Also, if you're a donor, we're doing a private live Q&A this Saturday. So if you sign up to donate on Patreon, YouTube members, or through PayPal through the website, you're welcome to participate in that. And that's where we're just going to go through every question, no super chats there. And finally, I know you have been asking for me for this for a while, but it's finally coming up soon. The documentary Exodus Rediscovered that I have been working on for a long time as well. The donors helped to pick the title back in September, and this is what they decided on, Exodus Rediscovered. A lot of data to go over. I think the runtime now is 73 minutes for the documentary. So, and it's just going to be a lot of data, a lot of external evidence, a lot of internal evidence. We'll be premiering that on my channel then on that day. So stay tuned. A lot of good things coming up. So if you guys are ready, Marlon, I'm ready. Let's dive into the questions. What do we got going?
All right, let's jump into this. Let me get this banner down. All right, so we got our first question tonight, and it's coming from Jonathan Carlson. Jonathan Carlson has super chatted for, I've given $5 basically for super chat. Question from Mike. I just cannot get over how a perfect God can create a world with death in it. Can you explain death before the fall?
Sure, yeah. So I've made a Genesis 1 to 11 series where I argue that there is death before the fall. I also do an analysis of Romans 5 in that series, specifically on one of the videos with regards to Genesis 3. Now, why would God create death before the fall? There's actually a paper written by Josh Rasmussen and Jordan Westling that dives into this specific topic. And they talk about how God created sort of like an evolving universe over time. The reason being is, for one thing, God cannot create something that is perfect, because if he's going to create anything, it's going to be contingent, and by definition, it can't be perfect. God also doesn't want to determine creatures to act a certain way. How does he get around that? Well, he creates a universe with simple origins that is slowly going to evolve and progress according to random processes. We know from studying the universe, things like quantum mechanics and chaos theory, the universe is not Newtonian deterministic. There's a randomness involved. So the universe evolves randomly and churns out unique souls with unique back histories that have not been determined by God. Now that's going to cause imperfections. They do address this in the paper, but those are going to slowly be weeded out as God slowly moves towards a paradise type world reality. So death is not God's end goal. It's something that he wants to get rid of, but he's going to work through it in a process where he's not determining things because he doesn't want to take away our free will. Now, there's a lot to unpack in everything I said. I don't have time to go over it all now. I can tell you to check out the paper, and I promise in June I will have a video on suffering specifically, where I will go over a lot of that stuff as well as address things like animal suffering and animal death and whatnot. It is my view, I'll be following philosophers like Trent Doherty, that animals can also, much like humans, the Bible does, he argues from scripture that the Bible does agree animals can have an afterlife and can participate in soul building. And I'll break a lot of that down in that video.
All right, all right. Coming up, next question we have is coming from JDM Apologetics, and he is given a $5 super chat. Question is, do you hold to God's timelessness? How do you reconcile free will on a B theory of time? How does free will relate to idealism?
Yeah, good question. I don't know if that would really. I mean, free will and idealism would just they'd be compatible. I don't think it would be anything different on a substance dualist account. But with regards to B theory and how free will works, B theory only says that the universe is four-dimensional and time is one of the dimensions. So it's like a block universe. You step outside, you could see the whole time, so to speak. Now, it's still me in a future block making those decisions based on my past experience. It doesn't mean I'm determined, because in those specific block instances on the B theory of time, it's still me making those. It's just from the outside perspective, someone who's in a timeless perspective, it would look like a sort of being of time making all those decisions instantaneously. But it would still be me making those decisions. It doesn't mean I'm determined to do so. If you could travel to the future into a different block on B theory of time, you would see me making those decisions. And if you came back to this time, that wouldn't mean you're determining my decisions in the future. So it's still, you got to look at it from the perspective of what is the cause. Free will is about who is the cause of the action. And in the block universe, it's still the agent. It's just from the outside perspective, you could see all the actions happening at once.
All right. Next question is coming from, let me go to the next page. Got a lot of super chats here. All right. Next question is coming from Tristan2102. Are you familiar with any of David Bentley Hart's work? What are your thoughts on some of his arguments for Christian universalism?
I am not an expert on him. I apologize. He's written a lot, and I just haven't had time to get around to him. On Christian universalism, here's my take on it. I'm not convinced of it. I wish it was true, therefore I don't debate it, because I wish it was true. I don't want Christian universalism to be wrong. I want everyone in heaven. I want everyone in the resurrection. So I really, really hope they're right. I'm just not convinced by their arguments, so therefore I won't debate them, because if I debate them, I'm going to be like, yeah, go, yeah, but I don't know, so it's like one of those conundrums for me there.
All right. Next question. Sure. This is coming from Ben Reggae. I think I pronounced his name right. Does God wonder why he exists and how he got there? Got here, should I say?
No, I don't. Yeah, no, I don't think he does, because he's not his, like the prophet Isaiah says, my ways are not your ways, my thoughts are not your thoughts. He does not exist in a state of time in his essence. His energies would exist in time, in my view, I guess you could say. But he would not wonder these types of things. He just simply is. So it'd be like wondering why 2 + 2 = 4. It just simply is, kind of an attitude.
All right. Next question coming at you. That's from Libertarians Belong in Jail. What do you think about supposed forged books in the Bible, like 2 Peter, Hebrews, and pastoral letters? Are they complete forgeries? Even the early church fathers were unsure of their authorship.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I did a video about 8 months ago titled Who Wrote the Bible? Cultural Context of the Biblical World, Part 4. Check that out for more details. You might like what you see. And my point in that video is that I don't have to say that Peter wrote 2 Peter. I don't have to say that Paul wrote Hebrews or the pastoral epistles, because in the ancient world, they could utilize people as authority figures. So at one point, Cicero writes to a friend, and he's like, write in my name, he says, write in my name and tell the people this, or tell so-and-so this. So they could do that kind of thing. When it comes to Second Peter, my view would be kind of like set Peter's in jail because that's where it starts from, and he tells somebody, "Hey, I need you to write a letter for me. Make sure it says this, this, and this, and this." And they would have still assumed that that letter was from Peter, and it would have been okay. If you read a lot of Paul's letters, like Ephesians, Galatians, it mentions other authors, like Thessalonians and First and Second Thessalonians are actually written by three people. If you read like the first two verses, it will state that. So I take that kind of view. Basically, I don't think Paul just produced all his letters by himself. The early church, with Paul as the authority figure, produced those letters. I don't think Matthew just produced the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew produced it with a community of church fathers or early church members helping him with that. Likewise, I could see Peter, the pastoral epistles, and Hebrews like that as well. So I don't think they're forgeries per se. They would be forgeries in the modern sense. But according to the ancient cultural context, I don't think they would be forgeries. So no, I think I take a middle road approach on that kind of view.
All right. Next question. It's coming from Chance O'Connor. Thank you for the super chat. Are you a foundationalist, and why or why not?
Yes, I'm a foundationalist in epistemology, and I just because I'm not convinced by coherentism. I think coherentism is just it's like you're trying to use the same things to try to help support it. I think we need foundational beliefs to build upon, and so I do follow Alvin Planting on that. So check out Alvin Planting's work on that if you want more.
All right. Next question. It's coming from Angelican Atheistics. What do you
Anglican.
make Anglican? Oh, my bad. Anglican. Woo. What do you what do you make of the infinite regress argument against free will? If you actualize a potential path, then you must actualize it by some action, etc.
Yeah, so Kyle Allender of Christian Idealism and I are going to do a video on this eventually. We just need to get around to it. The problem is that this very argument is assuming reductionism, that somehow uh, my actions were sort of predetermined by my desires, and my desires were predetermined by something else. You can't think of the human mind or consciousness in those reductionist terms. That's presupposing a physicalist or a reductionist view. I would say that the buck stops at my mind. Now, my mind is a collection of thoughts, beliefs, desires, etc. But that all sort of goes together to make a cumulative whole, namely my soul or my identity. And that self, that person, is what all that stuff working together creates the ego, creates the identity that sort of makes the choice. So you cannot think of the information of the soul or your identity as sort of reducing constantly, because I would argue that's not how we as persons work. So that's how you get around that. You point out this is presupposing reductionism, and using that type of logic doesn't work.
All right. Next question. Coming from Andrew Villalobos. And would you be interested in Thomism? Why and why not?
Yeah, I definitely am. It's very similar to idealism. I have read Ed Pfizer recently on that, and I find a lot of his stuff interesting. I've also been reading another Thomist, Nigel Cundy, his big book on physics. I read about half of that so far, so I'm looking more into it. I need to study it more. So yeah, I'd probably just be more of an idealistic Thomist if I ever go down that route.
Right. Next question here. Next question is coming from Eric. What is your favorite movie or movies, and what is your least favorite movie or movies? Love your content.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I've been on his channel. He's got a great channel. Favorite movie probably is Lord of the Rings, just because I love Lord of the Rings, I love the books, and I think Peter Jackson did a phenomenal job. But I don't know what went wrong with The Hobbit. It was horrible. Least favorite movies are probably the Twilight Saga, just because they're horrible. Um, oh man, they're bad. I do. I mean, I don't know. I have different. I like different movies for different things. I enjoy The Room, even though it's a horrible film. It's just there's something about it. You just got to love to watch that over and over again. There's a great movie called Equilibrium back from the 90s. I probably my favorite director, Dark Knight, Inception. Forget his name right now because I'm horrible at remembering names, but love his stuff. Tenet was a very interesting film. I need to watch that again. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
All right. Next questions come from OP. Thank you for the super chat, OP. Appreciate it. Every supernatural event has always turned out to be natural. Think lightning and Zeus. Why should the resurrection be any different?
Well, that's simply an association fallacy, and I would argue that not every supernatural event has turned out to be natural. You could argue from other claims of miracles. I know Braxton Hunter on his channel recently presented a lot of evidence, Trinity Radio, for some other miracle claims. Craig Keener in his book on miracles presents a lot of evidence for other miracle claims. And so that's one way to respond to that. And plus, there is no good naturalistic explanation for the resurrection. If you see naturalistic explanations, they tend to get very ad hoc. They start multiplying entities beyond necessity, and it just fails down. And even if every other every other alleged supernatural event turned out to be natural, that wouldn't mean the resurrection was explained by a natural event. That'd be an association fallacy, or you'd be committing a hasty generalization.
All right. Next question. I've heard Jerry Cohen, I don't know how to pronounce that name, and others mentioned
Jerry Cohen.
Jerry Cohen and others mentioned that religion and social dysfunction are correlated. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'd like to see the studies because I've not seen that in a lot of the studies I've looked at, and I've looked at over 100 on intrinsic religiosity. It would also need to know if he's talking about extrinsic or intrinsic religiosity, because intrinsic religiosity, which is what basically is you're religious because you want to follow God or a particular religious set of beliefs, that is not correlated at all with any sort of negative mental behavior. In fact, numerous studies have shown intrinsic religiosity helps and aids mental health in numerous ways. There was a meta-analysis that looked at over 800 studies and found that conclusion. And I talk about it in my debate with Aaron Raw. So I'll look up Jerry Cohen after and see what he has, but I'd be highly suspicious given all the data I've looked at.
Right. Next question. Thank you for the super chat, Theist Thinker. Do you think you'll ever cover an Aristotelian proof for God, or something like Dr. Feser's argument for an immaterial mind?
Probably in the future, I'd want to read more on that. I'm very heavily focused on the scientific data, and they focus more on philosophical arguments. The reason is because the science was pretty convincing for me, and that's what I like to focus on. But yeah, I probably should do that eventually down the road. I just haven't gotten around to it. Right now, I've had a lot of requests to do Old Testament archaeology, talk about the Mosaic Law. So that's what I have planned coming down. But yeah, I will try to circle back and get to some of those eventually. I need to read more Ed Pfizer before I do that, though.
Okay. Next question is coming from Jess. Thank you for the super chat, Jess. What are your opinion on the Deuteronomical books? Are they canon? Why or why not?
Depends on what you mean by canon. If you mean by canon, you mean that they're good for teaching. Yeah, I think they're good for teaching. I wouldn't say they're scriptural because there are some issues with regards to that. I mean, they're not pseudepigrapha, so they're obviously much better than like the Book of Enoch, for example. But I think they're good for teaching and instructing. I wouldn't necessarily call them scripture per se. So I'm not super Protestant when it comes to those. Like, no, never. And I'm not super Orthodox. Like, yes, we must. I'm kind of in the middle. I think, if you think they're useful for helping, sure. But if it goes against scripture, what we all agree on, the 66 books, I would question it. Like, there are some things, for example, in Sirach that I do look at and go, this seems a little bit derogatory with regards to women. There's some things in Tobit I think are a little fanciful, but I mean, it is what it is. It's not a big deal for me either way.
All right, next question. Steadfast and easy. Appreciate your super chat. Are you aware that Genesis 11:26 disproves your first point in top 10 reasons?
Sure it does. You got to read Genesis 12. In fact, go to defendingerrancy.com and they agree with me on this. The reason is because in Genesis 12, after Terah dies, it says Abraham left his father's house, and Terah died at 205, but it says Abraham was 75. So 205 minus 75 says Abraham was actually 130. Now, what defending errancy, I believe answers in Genesis does this as well, as they point out. In Genesis 11:26, it says Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and the other son as well. So what they'll point out is he started fathering kids at 70 if the ages are literal, and Abraham was probably the youngest. Again, this is not coming from me. This is coming from younger creationists like people you see at Defending Errancy, all sorts of other websites to do that. He's getting this from Ken Hovind, who did a response to me yesterday, which I just thought was so wonderful. It was so bad. He responded to the first three in that video. So that was how he tried to get with the 10, number 10. He said, well, Genesis 11:27 says it was 70. No, Kent, read Genesis 12. To quote Ken Hovind, you're either lying or stupid, Ken, because that's what he said about me, because he's such a wonderful guy. Well, I laughed my way through that video, by the way. The second one, he tried to get around Genesis 8 by saying something to the effect that, no, the whole earth, coeteres, doesn't actually mean the whole earth. Thanks, Kent. That's what I wanted you to admit. And he even said it could be possible that after Genesis 8:5, the mountains went back under the water before they came back up again. Whew. And then the last one he tried to respond to was also bad because he just admitted, yeah, there are metaphors in Genesis 2, which is my point. Now, for anyone listening, go watch my video on Genesis 2, the dust on the rib, where I point out when the language in the Hebrew with regards to Eve is highly metaphorical as well, because the word rib is not in Genesis 2. It's actually the word side. So his whole side was taken from him to make Eve. So I detail a lot about that. But yeah, he's getting that from Kent Hovind, who just responded to me, and it was bad. But he's planning to respond next week, and I can't wait to watch. But yeah, when you look at Abraham's age for Terah, you have to look at Genesis 11:26 plus the opening of Genesis 12, because it says Abraham was 75 when he left Haran after his father Terah had died, which was at 205. The young earth creationists will say that, well, that's because Terah started fathering at 70 and he didn't have Abraham until he was 130. So, and plus, even if this is all wrong, even if he really did father him at 70, you got another problem. Because start calculating the ages of Jacob when he had Benjamin and Joseph. It's in his 90s. It's very close to 100, actually. I think some people have even put him having Joseph or Benjamin at like 98 or something. So somehow Abraham can't have kids at 100, but his grandson can, basically, for around 100. So again, there's a lot more you got to look into with regards to that. Sorry, I went on a
All
big
right.
long tangent there, but yeah.
All right. Next question here. Coming from Jefferson Fowler. Appreciate you for the super chat. Does accepting Thomas Aquinas' first proof of God's existence from motion necessarily lead to determinism?
No, not necessarily, because it's just talking about putting inanimate objects into motion. It's not talking about free will consciousness, these types of things. Agents have the ability to not be set in motion if they don't want to. If you push me, I have the ability to stop and turn around and go, don't do that again. So no, I don't think it actually works, because Aquinas, I've been a long time since I've read Aquinas, but I do vaguely remember him talking about how agents are separate with regards to that.
All right. Next question coming at you. All right. Where do you personally draw the line of preterism? Still adhere the early church creeds?
Yeah, so I point out I'm a partial preterist in that I'm waiting for the second coming of Christ, final resurrection, final judgment. I'm only a preterist in the sense that I don't think there's going to be a future tribulation. I don't think there's going to be a future antichrist. I'm a post millennialist in that sense, and that I think the age of the church is going to keep growing and growing until it makes the millennial kingdom. I am very optimistic about the future, long term thinking. So I'm not a full preterist. I think that borders on heresy.
All right. Does God have emotions? If so, in what sense?
Of course he does. He's an emotional being and created us to have emotional connections with. I mean, he's an agent. I think to be an agent means you would experience emotions in that sense. So yeah, I do think God has emotions, and he would have them similar to us. I mean, he created us. He created life to be relational in communion with him. So I think he feels pain. He can suffer. He can feel sadness. He can feel joy, happiness, all those things.
All right. Next question coming at you. Thank you, Wyatt, for the super chat. How would you respond to the notion that God is a moral monster for commanding the killing of women and children during conquest in the Old Testament?
So I did a video on this probably about a year ago where I just mentioned it. It's in my cultural context playlist series on my channel. It's number 2, and I use it as an example. And that's probably hyperbole in the Old Testament. A lot of passages in ancient Near Eastern world talk about like we utterly annihilated. We left no one alive that breathed, all the men, women, and children. By the way, we brought back all these thousands of slaves. Well, wait a minute. I thought you said you killed literally everyone. So this book here, Daily Life in Ancient Mesopotamia. She mentioned some of that towards the end. It's in Egyptian annals, Egyptian studies as well. It's hyperbole. It's like if we talked about a football game, one team utterly annihilated the other team. There was no one left alive, kind of details. So I don't think it necessarily is commanding the killing of women and children. Jericho, for example, was a fort. It wouldn't necessarily have had that many women and children. Richard Hess talks about this in some of his work on Joshua. Also check out the work of Paul Copan on with regards to that. A lot of this is hyperbole. A great book by him is Did God Command Genocide?
All right. Next question. Thank you, Eric, again. Thank you for the super chat. Would you debate Aaron Ra a second time?
Maybe. I felt like he was kind of rude after the debate in some of his video replies. Kind of went a little too far, but maybe. I'm not gonna hold it against him. I had a lot of fun hanging out with him that day, even though we disagree on a lot. So maybe. Depends on the topic, really. At this point, I'm just trying to. I got a big debate with Michael Shermer and Apostate Prophet coming up, so I'm looking forward to those right now.
Next question. Thank you, Christian Metalhead. Hey, Mike, big fan. What is your favorite band, whiskey, bourbon, and debate that you've participated in?
I don't know what my favorite band is because I'm not a big music guy. I just listen to stuff I like and go with there. Favorite whiskey's Talisker Storm or anything by Bruce Ladich. They're amazing. I love them. I just discovered them recently, well, about 6 months ago. I just fell in love with them. So favorite debate I've participated in. Oh, anything with Cosmic Skeptic. I just like talking with him. He's a great guy. So maybe my last debate with him on the problem of evil, or maybe my debate with him on ethics. I thought that was fun. I like talking with him. But there's probably other ones I just am forgetting right now. Who knows?
All right, next question. Lovely Rose, thank you for the super chat. Soon to be
Catholic.
Catholic. I think she meant Catholic here. What does God think about his existence? Does he say to himself that his existence is a necessity?
Yeah, I mean, it would be that God is necessary. He cannot fail to exist, kind of thing. I don't think he has to say it to himself. It just is. It's just simply a brute fact with regards to God. He simply is, and all other things are contingent upon him.
Right. Next question. Thank you, Devin, for the super chat. I noticed that Genesis goes from less descriptive writing to more to more. Is there any thought out there that Genesis was compiled over time as writing progressed? Would ask questions better but poor?
Yeah, I think it probably was. I think there was a later compiler that put it all together. I would probably maybe put it during maybe the monarchy period, would be the first proto-Genesis, and then it was finalized during the Babylonian period. So I do think there may have been a proto form of Genesis early on when they were collecting all these writings. Like I think Genesis 6:1 to 4 is probably a very older source that was put in with regards to that. I think maybe the last or the first chapter of Genesis was a new prologue. It was put on sometime during the divided monarchy period. I think it was put together over a period of time. Check out my video, Who Wrote the Bible? Cultural Context of the Biblical World, Part 4. I detail a lot of that with regards to the books being written over time. I quote Michael Heiser in there. He talks about, he uses this thing called the holy stapler analogy. It should really get home at what we mean when we talk about it being written and being finalized by later editors and whatnot. So yeah, I do think it definitely had a long process put into it. And I think that makes it better because it's not just the works of one guy, it's the community that's saying we want to preserve the truth, we want to make sure it gets right, and it's better to have a group working together to get something right versus just one guy claiming to get it all right.
All right. Next question here. All right. Thank you for the super chat. Since the earth is and measures demonstrably flat and motionless, as stated in the Bible, why should anyone believe in heliocentrism, a false religion?
Okay, so again, this is why I did the cultural context series because it's so vital. Cultural context of the biblical world, part 3, talk about locution and illocution. So yeah, ancient people did think the earth was flat, but that doesn't mean God did. In the way it's actually written in the Bible, it's God using certain language. So give you an analogy. Tomorrow the sun's going to rise. Meteorologists would say that. We don't actually think the sun is going to rise. We're using the locution, the literal meaning of our words, to portray an illocutive meaning behind it, namely that we're going to see the earth rise. So I talk about that a lot in that video. It's a video on if the earth was flat, and I talk about locution and illocution in there. God uses the ancient Near Eastern context to portray a very important message down to the people. So no, I don't think the earth is actually flat. I believe that the earth is round and goes around the sun. So sorry, but I appreciate the super chat.
All right. Thank you for the super chat. How do you go about doing research? When you're doing homework on a particular topic, how do you get that info and find that right scholars in the field?
Good question. It's a process. I think it has to. a lot of it comes from experience. So I read a lot of books. As you can tell, there's books behind me. I have a lot of ebooks now. And I will make a lot of highlights and keep notes of things. I'll check their sources. I need to go through the book, The Jesus Legend, because I want to check a lot of their sources, and follow up on a lot of things they say. So that's a good way to start. Get some books, try to read about 10 pages a day. I do about 30 pages a day. And go through, make highlights, make outlines. Sometimes I'll do that if it's helpful. And then I'll just start working on a script. If I come to writer's block, I'll spend some time researching things. Sometimes a good thing to do is do keyword search in Google Books and just verify the books are written by credible sources. And then don't just read the quote you need, read the surrounding context. So if I do that on Google Books, I'll tend to read about 20 pages of that book to make sure I'm not taking something out of context. JSTOR is another good site. JSTOR, academia.edu is another good site. So things like that, keyword searches. We have Google. Sometimes if you know what you're doing, just make sure you're not, citing blogs that are not sourced well. Make sure you're citing actual historians. If it comes from a book or a paper that has a credible author, use it. Look and see what they cite. Check their sources, because sometimes it could open you up to even better sources. That happens to me all the time. So I wouldn't say I have a clear method for doing research. It's just I go with the flow. I try my best to really hammer out a topic as best I can. Like for my documentary on the Exodus, I was telling Marlon before we got started that once I got a good, clear indication of who I thought the Exodus Pharaoh was, I just looked up everything I can on him. I mean, books, papers, whatever I could find. I just had to read everything I could on the guy to make sure my theory was pretty sound.
All right, next question coming at you. All right, thank you for the super chat. Would you like to share your testimony?
It's kind of rather boring. I mean, basically, I was raised in a very young Earth creationist fundamentalist church. Didn't really enjoy going to church. Got picked on and beat up there, so I sort of walked away from Christianity for a while. But I didn't find a lot of good atheist material. For some reason I ended up with a lot of Jesus mysticists, and that I just knew that was crap because I used to love reading Egyptian mythology and Persian and Greek mythology, and they knew a clue what they were talking about. But that sort of made me think, well, maybe the Christians have some better material. So I read a lot of C.S. Lewis, tectonics.org. I remember reading some of that, some other authors as well. So I think it was just a slow process for me coming back. I'm very analytical in terms of how I think. It was a slow process during my days in the Air Force when I think I finally became back and became a Christian. I don't think it was actually one just set moment for me, honestly.
All right, next question. Thank you for the super chat, Nicholas. If death wasn't a result of sin, then why did God have to be a human and die for sin? Also, it's flat earth in reference to Mikakowski Cosmos.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what the second question is regards to. Also, no, I'm not really sure. I have to look more into that. If that's what the result of sin, why did I go to? Well, first of all, sin resulted in humans dying because they lost access to the tree of life. They could have been immortal. They weren't. They failed that, so they got sent back out into the wilderness, and so they began to die again. So that's what Genesis 3 is pretty clear. They were mortal, and the only reason they could be immortal was they had access to the tree of life. So Jesus came to restore that relationship in Eden, and now we can be immortal through his resurrection and his power. So there is physical death connected. It's just connected in a very certain way, how Genesis 3 lays it out.
Right. Next question. Thank you, Eric, for the super chat. Do you believe the gifts of the Holy Spirit are for today? I believe they are, but many of the people that claim them are not genuine.
Yeah, I think they are. I just think they're rare. I don't think, I think they were rare during the biblical time period as well. So just think, I mean, from the time period of Jacob wrestling with God, there wasn't really any miracles performed before Israel until Moses. You have 200 some years before that comes up again. And yes, I do think it's about 200 some years based on the Septuagint understanding of Exodus dating methods. So yeah, there are long bouts where God is not going to necessarily do miracles. Think of all the time gaps in Judges. So yeah, I do think they are, but I just think they're rare.
Next question. Thank you, Darius, for the super chat. If God is absolutely moral and morality is absolute, then why were some things a sin in the Old Testament, but not a sin in the New Testament? P.S. God bless you. You rock.
Great question. So So we have to remember that sometimes something is a covenantal sin. So eating pork was a covenantal sin in that sense. God set up this particular covenant and said, within the stipulations of this covenant, I have some things I want you to do for ritualistic, ceremonial purposes. It would have been a sin for Noah to disobey God in building the ark. Okay, that doesn't mean it's an absolute moral sin. So not every command God gives is necessarily a moral absolute. Also, we have to remember that God was working with humans, meeting them where they were. Jesus talks about this in Matthew 19 when he says a law of divorce was given because your hearts were hard. In other words, you just weren't ready for a perfect moral law yet because you just were at a much lower place. And so I'm working to bring you up to a much better place. We call this moral progress. God is slowly, okay, humans, you're here now. Let's get you to a better place. Okay, now that you're in this better place, move up another step kind of attitude. God wants his people to continue to grow and be virtuous. So he's going to work with them where they are. So that's one way to look at it. I'll be doing a video on that over the summer for sure.
All right. Next question. Thank you for the super chat. What do you think about people that follow other religions claiming to have had experiences with their God?
Well, it's entirely possible. I mean, the Bible talks about other demonic forces out there. I would not doubt that it could be possible for a second. I read a book called The Deities Are Many by Jordan Paper, who is a pagan and believes he's having experiences with some sort of spirits or whatnot. Fine. I mean, read Michael Heiser's book on the Divine Council, or the Unseen Realm. It's the title of the book, Unseen Realm. Talks about the Bible fully acknowledges the existence of other deities out there that can interact with humans. So, sounds perfectly fine on a Christian worldview.
All right. Next question. If God did not create the universe, but was bringing it into order in creation week, how can you explain John 8:58, John 1, 2, and 3, and Matthew 19:8?
John 8:58 is before Abraham was, I am. I mean, he's just basically saying that, um, before there was time, I was kind of thing, basically, that's not really inconsistent because I agree God created time, space, matter, the universe, everything. I just don't think that's what Genesis 1 is focusing on. Same with John 1, 2, 3. This is written in a post-Aristotelian world in Greek, and they're interested in those questions. I don't think the ancient authors of Genesis necessarily were interested in the same things. They were more interested in saying that, pointing out to the pagans, no, Yahweh orders and controls the cosmos, not your dumb pagan deities. It's Yahweh. With regards to Matthew, I would need to look that up here really quick later to remind myself what that is.
I have the
Yeah,
verse here,
Moses.
Mike.
Yeah, I
The
don't
verse says,
see
he
any.
said to them, because of your hardness of your heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning, it has not been this way.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the context of this is the beginning of marriage. If I told you about the beginning of the school year, back in the beginning, I was really struggling with some of the readings. And if I notice what I just said back in the beginning, I'm not referring to the beginning of creation. The context, me struggling with the readings, refers to the beginning of the school year. So I think Matthew is talking about when God established marriage, which would be Genesis 2, not day 1 in Genesis 1.
Sure, I got that right. All right. All right. Thank you for the super chat. Have you considered making a series arguing for the existence of a perfect God, similar to that of Rasman?
Josh Rasmussen, yeah. Yeah, I do need to get onto that. Again, it's another one of the topics I want to get to. Lately, patrons and donors have been requesting Old Testament, so that's what I've been focusing on. But yeah, I do want to get into philosophy eventually again. It's like, I'm one man. So I don't know what to tell you. I'm trying to do everything I can, but I'd like to get there eventually, yeah.
All right. And what a great super chat. Appreciate you, Christian, for that. Blessings from Dominican Republic. What are the spiritual practices that you value more in your personal life?
Prayer. Prayer is very important to me. But I pray very personally and quiet. I'm not very charismatic or out in the open. I've always been a very quiet kind of guy when it comes to spiritual practices. But yeah, very much prayer and worship. But I'm just, again, very personal for that. It's just how I am.
All right. And here's another super chat. Thank you, Garrett. Appreciate you. Would you ever cover topics regarding LGBT and Christianity?
Yeah, I plan to. It's just I want to do a series on normative ethics first because I feel like that would be foundational before I do LGBTQ. But yeah, I want to do a whole analysis on homosexuality in the Bible and just go through all the passages and try to be fair to both sides of the issues because I don't want to. I feel like when it comes to the Bible, it's a lot more complex than both sides like to make it out to be. I mean, the progressive and the conservative Christians. I'm probably going to lean more towards the conservative side, but maybe not as conservative as some people want. But it would take a. I feel like I'm in agreement with when N.T. Wright was asked that. He said, "Yeah, that would be a very big book to write," and I agree. I think it's a very. It'd take a while to get through it all. There's a lot to say on that.
Right. Next question, Dyson. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate you. Are we the only hominids made in Imago Dei? What about Neanderthals that went extinct? And does it matter that that our modern DNA is 2% theirs?
No, I don't think it matters because we have to talk about what the Imago Dei even means. If you check out my video, Genesis 1b, I talk about it in the Genesis series. I also have an older video, What Does It Mean to Be the Image of God? And my view is the Imago Dei is an election point. This is following one of my favorite philosophers, Joshua Moritz at Berkeley. Great Christian, great guy. Uh, Basically, it's when God elected humans to be his image bearers on earth. Michael Heiser also makes this in his book, The Unseen Realm. Uh, so basically, the Imago Dei means the exact same thing it means in the New Testament, that we are called to conform to the image of his Son. Humans were called to conform to God's image in Genesis, as well as in Exodus, and in the New Covenant as well. So it's an election point. It's when humans at a certain point were elected to be God's image. That included all of humanity at that time. And I think it was probably after Neanderthals probably were extinct.
Next question comes from Jacob. Thank you for the super chat. What got you interested in idealism in the first place?
What got me interested was probably with regards to David Hume's bundle theory, first of all. I thought that was very much like, that's very interesting. We're going to look at it all. Also, then quantum mechanics really started to get me into it because I was like, this is interesting. And so I think it was probably the beginning with the philosophical aspects, followed by the science really seemed to support it. And so I've been an idealist ever since. I wrote just one of my term papers for this past semester. I wrote on idealism. Any donors want, they can have access to either of the term papers. The second one I wrote was on a naturalistic origin with regards to religion that I think theists would actually agree with. So I'm trying to argue for an understanding of origin that both atheists and theists would accept. But my other paper was on idealism, and I argued from bundle theory and quantum field theory.
Next question. Thank you for the super chat. Can married Christians remain celibate except for procreation? If both partners consent to this, is sex required by faith in marriage? I've recently become interested in topics like sexual transmutation, semen retention.
Okay, I don't know what those last two things are, so I apologize. I think if a couple wants to do that, sure. But Paul does warn, do not deprive everyone for a long period of time, because I think sex is very, very important for humans. We're very relational creatures. This is why there's a whole book on the Bible about sex called the Song of Solomon that gets very graphic. It's so graphic that if they read it with modern connotations, it would not be allowed to be read on TV or the radio because it's so dirty. It's basically ancient Near Eastern erotica. So I would caution with regards to that idea, unless both agree with it. Now, the older a couple is, I think it probably would be easier from what I've heard. But I mean, you really got to make sure it's okay with the partners for that. But I mean, that's between you and God ultimately. But I don't know. Uh, Keep an open mind, I guess.
All right. Next question. Thank you for the super chat. What is the best evidence that the Gospels contain eyewitness testimony?
Check out Richard Bauckham's work, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, second edition, as well as Craig Keener's book, Christ a Biography. There's a lot of good evidence for that in there. One of the, I don't know if there's a best evidence. There's all sorts of little evidences. Like there's a lot of good external evidence that I talk about in my New Testament series. It aligns very well with what we have found in the archaeological record. There's a lot of good internal evidence, like the McGrews talked about with undesigned coincidences. And of course, then there is uh, the evidence that this was an oral tradition. Now that I think about it, probably my favorite would be the evidence that it would be an oral tradition. because the way they sort of transfer Jesus's teachings very much in mnemonic in oral tradition structures to enhance memorization. Things are written in a parallelismus bombarum. They're written in ways to sort of enhance and control memory. If you were writing fiction, you wouldn't really need to focus on that because you were just writing fiction right then and there. But they're trying their best to preserve the actual oral traditions of Jesus, and so they're written in this very rhythmic and flowic way to sort of preserve that kind of thing. And so that would probably imply it actually came from people that actually were aware of the early traditions that were handed down from Jesus to the early church, the eyewitnesses that Luke implies he is aware of in the beginning of his gospel. So I would say that's a strong evidence. But again, there's all sorts of little pieces there. I don't know if there would be one piece. I feel like it'd be a cumulative case based on several things you'd build up for.
Next question. Thank you for the super chat. How is yours and Christian idealism dual aspect idealism, not ultimately pantheism? It sounds identical to Hindu qualified non-dualism. If it is dual aspect, is it not still monism?
Well, we're monism in an ontological sense, but we're not monistic with regards to God. We would be panentheists, specifically weak panentheists. We follow church fathers like Gregory Palamas, Clement of Alexandria, and even going back to Philo when they talk about God's energy essence distinction. I did a video called Christianity and Panentheism, where we point out that the Greek Orthodox Church has actually been teaching panentheism based on scripture like Acts 17:28, for example, as well as some passages in 1 Corinthians 6, I believe. But check out that video where I go into it. It's not pantheism because we're not saying the universe is God. We're saying that God creates the universe as sort of like speaking it into existence through his words or his thoughts. And so he sort of controls it as sort of like a mental reality that is contingent upon him. That would be panentheism, specifically weak panentheism. So we reject Hegel and Whitehead's forms of strong panentheism because we think that puts the universe in God's essence, which we reject.
Next question. Thank you, Devin. I think Devin gave 2 super chats. Thank you, Devin. Appreciate you. How do you interpret the part of the Bible that says you can get sick by taking communion unworthy?
I'd have to look at the passage because I don't remember it off the top of my head. It depends on what he means by sick. We have to check the Greek there. A lot of times those words can be very general to refer to maybe regards to the mental aspects of how it could make you feel. So I would need to check and need a little more context. Devin, if you want, just email me through my website, ask me the same thing, and give me the passage reference, and I'll look that up. So I apologize, I can't give you a better answer right now, but just try doing that and just say, hey, it's Devin, give me some more details.
All right, Darius, thank you for the super chat. Can a Christian live in sin and still consider himself to be saved and go to heaven if dying without repenting of those sins, sex, porn, etc.?
Well, I mean, again, sin does not separate us from God. What separates us from God is wanting to be our own Lord and Master, wanting to be the God of our own worlds. That's what gets you in hell. You're building your own hell from within. I don't think so because what happens if tomorrow I die in a car crash and I didn't have time to confess my sins just as it happens? I don't think that necessarily sends someone to hell because you're saved by the redemptive work of Christ. By grace you are saved through faith. It's not of works so that no man can boast, Ephesians chapter 2. You have to remember that's what saves you. It's the work of Christ, not your work of confessing. So we need to be very careful with where the confession of sins comes in. We ought to confess our sins whenever we can and repent of them. But we have to understand that's not what has saved us. What has saved us is the redemptive work of Christ.
All right. Next question coming at you. Thank you, Caleb, for the super chat. Playing the devil's advocate, God is invisible and not detectable through natural senses. How's it different from something which does not exist?
Well, that's assuming logical positivism, the idea that it's something only exists if we can sense it through our 5 senses. And I would argue that that's just not simply the case. For example, you can't really see my consciousness. You can only see the effects of a conscious agent. How do you know I really have consciousness? We cannot see mathematical truths. We presuppose them in that sense. So, I mean, we wouldn't say God is necessarily invisible. He's just immaterial. He does not manifest in a physical sense. And not everything we learn is through the five senses. So even Noam Chomsky wrote some work on this with regards to language. And he points out that a lot of children are born with innate skills that allow them to use language really fast and develop it quite fast. That does not come from the five senses. That comes from innate qualities that they have before they're born. So we know and learn a lot of things before we were even born. And this goes back to Immanuel Kant. He said, if all knowledge comes from experience, where did we get the knowledge of how to have an experience? So there's two aspects of that. I mean, God is not invisible, he's just immaterial, and there's other ways to learn about immaterial things. So you can't see quarks, we have to infer they exist based on available data and experiments. Um, by that sense, they're invisible to the naked eye. They're invisible to even to some of our instruments. We can only detect effects and infer they're there. And again, not all knowledge comes from natural senses.
All right, just let everyone know out there we're at the hour mark of this live Q&A. We have about 30 minutes left, so get those super chats in. Let's help this brother out so he can continue his ministry into 2021. All right, next question. Thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on critical race theory and Christianity? Can you practice both, or are they antithetical to each other?
So just real quick, if we don't get to every super chat, if you want to sign up to be a donor, we'll be doing a private uh, uh, live Q&A this Saturday morning. So you can come in there and I answer every question as I can before I pass out, kind of thing. Sometimes we can go 2 hours if we need to. But so that's all just for donors. If anyone's interested, they can sign up to donate, and we'll do that this Saturday. I don't think critical race theory and Christianity are compatible. Critical race theory, I'm not the expert on this specific thing, but I do have issues with it. From what I can gather and what I've learned so far on it is that it teaches that race is important to the identity, and there are some races that are oppressed and and there are some races that are privileged. I don't think that's something that we should be teaching. I would like to follow Martin Luther King Jr. in saying that he hopes he had a dream that one day we would judge a man by the content of his character, not the color of his skin. And I feel like critical race theory is more focused on the color of skin, and that really bothers me. I don't agree with that kind of logic at all. So I think they are antithetical. Christ looks at the heart. He came, there is neither Jew nor Greek, free nor slave, male nor female, you are all one in Christ. We're not set up by our different races or genders. We are all one in Christ, and we need to remember that it doesn't matter the skin color. God shows favoritism to no one. So some races aren't privileged. We don't need to give special favors to certain races. God shows favoritism to no one. So I don't think that's compatible with Christianity, and I would take Jesus' route any day over critical race theory.
Next question coming at you. Thank you for the super chat. You came into my life like a wrecking ball. If you had to preach one message for the rest of your life, what message would it be? Merry Christmas. Keep them coming.
The great way to promo for the video tomorrow. Probably the video I'm releasing tomorrow, the lost message of the Bible. I think that's a very important topic I'm going to get to. I'm going to go through a lot of places in the Bible and talk about how it all points to Christ. So probably that.
Next question. Thank you, Nathan, for the super chat. Which view best explains theism? Classical theism, theistic personalism, pantheism?
I went back and forth on this for a while. I would say classical theism and weak panentheism. I don't see those two as being incompatible. I'm not a theistic personalist. I think I may have been temporarily, and then I was like, wait a minute, no, I'm not. I kind of an attitude. Don't know why I went there, but no, I'm definitely a classical theist in that sense. But also, I think it's compatible with weak panentheism.
Okay. Thank you, Nicholas, for the super chat. What do you think of arguments for reason for God's existence?
Oh, I like that. I think it's a good secondary argument. C.S. Lewis developed it. There's a book called C.S. Lewis's Dangerous Idea. Victor Reppert wrote. It's very good. I do remember enjoy reading it. It's another one of the things I want to get around to. I just haven't. I don't think it'd be one of my primary arguments for God's existence, but I think it's a good secondary argument that helps to make a cumulative case.
All right. Next question. Thank you, Jess, for the super chat. What's your view of sacraments, ordinances, communion, baptism? Are they merely symbolic or something more?
Um, I don't know if I'm really that nailed down to that. I do think they are definitely symbolic. Understanding in the Old Testament, there was a lot of symbolism that was necessary. A lot of the Old Testament laws were meant for symbolism. Symbolism rituals were very important for them. So I do think that's their primary aim. They could be more in the New Covenant, but it's not something I'm really married to, I guess you could say. But read up on Old Testament laws like the Sabbath and eating the dietary laws. Those were all symbolic for very important reasons. If you check out Richard Hess's book, Israelite Religions, he talks about that. They did these things to symbolically show how much they were committed to Yahweh. And I feel like a lot of that is going to carry on in the New Testament as well. You're doing these things to show how much you are committed to Jesus.
Next question. Thank you for the super chat. Given your views on Revelations and Antichrist, no Antichrist, if I heard you right, do you ever plan on making a video or videos on the subject?
Yeah, I plan to. I need to read more on that as well, though. It's Revelation, we would look at as like an idealistic account between good and evil. John is writing from the island, and he's trying to encourage the Christians to keep facing persecution. So he's going to write in symbolic ways to sort of like give messages across that the Romans would not be able to pick up on as they transfer his letters for him. So that's something to keep in mind. And so we would say there's a lot of symbolism there on purpose. So that's my view of Revelation.
All right, we got some guys showing you some love. Mike, what's up, IP? You're my favorite apologist. Your work videos are awesome. All right,
Yeah,
Jose.
Jose is a great. He's been following me for a while. Appreciate it.
Excellent, excellent. All right, we got Benjamin23. Thank you for the super chat. What do you think of Gregory A. Boyd's book, Imperfect Inspiration? His views also on cross vision and crucifixion of the warrior God, all similar.
Yeah, it's not something I'm that familiar with, so I apologize. I'd have to read the whole book, and I haven't done that. But I do think God is definitely a warrior God. Check out Michael Heiser's book, Unseen Realm, because he talks a lot about how throughout the New Testament, Jesus is definitely displaying a lot of aspects of a warrior God and how he's dealing with the principalities in the unseen realm.
All right. Next question coming at you. Thank you for the super chat. Christ is King. Have you ever spoken with classical theist or Jay Dyer? Thank you. I enjoy many of your videos and appreciate all your work.
I'm not sure who classical theist is. I've probably spoken to him. I was supposed to debate Jay Dyer last December, and I was studying and preparing for the debate, so I was watching some of his stuff, and I found the debate where he was calling the other guy a retard and constantly insulting him. So I said, geez, this is rude. So I messaged Jay, and I'm like, hey, Jay, I'm not sure what happened here, but can you promise you'll at least be civil in our debate, not do this? And he lost his mind. And so Cameron of Capturing Christianity called off the debate because he started insulting Cameron in our Facebook Messenger group. So Cameron called off the debate, and then Jay blocked me on Twitter. So I can't debate him because he has me blocked, and he won't apologize for the crap he said. So I uploaded the entire conversation to my Facebook page last year to show everyone what the kind of crap he was saying. So right now, no, I'm not debating him because he's not acting like an adult.
Next question. Thank you for the super chat. Since you hang out with David Wood and Apostate Prophet, would you ever make videos responding to other religions?
Yeah, it's just not my thing right now. I'd like to keep defending Christianity and pointing people towards that before I go after other religions. If I do it, I might try to do Hinduism because I feel like David Wood has got a rap on Islam for now. Although I do want to do a video on Muhammad in the Bible because I hate when I hear that, oh, Muhammad's mentioned in the Bible. No, he isn't. Especially when they bring up the Song of Solomon. I love when they try to use that passage because they don't understand what the Song of Solomon is about. And trust me, you don't want a prophecy of Muhammad in the Song of Solomon.
All right, here's another one from Darius. Thank you. You've been hooking it up, Darius. Appreciate you, man. Does God see, hear, etc.? I suppose it happens through our consciousness, but how does he observe things that we don't, considering quantum mechanics?
Yeah, so he doesn't have to be like a giant eyeball looking into the universe, so he's not going to cause collapse to the wave function of the universe. Also, to keep in mind that the universe has sort of interacted with conscious agents, so decoherence is basically a set now. If you understand quantum mechanics, you know what I'm talking about. So we have to worry about wave functions constantly collapsing because the classical world is already decohered. Problem solved. So with regards to God and his consciousness, he doesn't have to be a separate physical entity looking in. He doesn't have like eyeballs and ears and a mouth or a nose kind of thing. So yeah, he would observe through our consciousness. And check out for more details. I talk about it in my video, Cosmic Conscious Argument for God's Existence. I did about 2 years ago. And so I deal with that objection there in more details.
Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate you. I think this is the second one from Theo. The Earth measures flat. Laser tests over 25 miles and long-range 250-mile infrared photography prove there is no hump of water between point A and B.
Okay, look, I'm not big on the flat Earth, but publish a paper, send me the published paper, and get it peer reviewed. If it's right, you go through that process. I have seen a lot of people deal with this through on the internet, and I don't think there was a lot of good evidence for it. But I mean, if again, publish a paper. That was my big thing when I was against evolution. Is people told me, look, there are published papers. Here's the evidence. Check it out. And I went back to the non-evolutionist crowd. And I said, how do you deal with this? And I didn't really get a lot of good responses with regards to that. It was just things that I didn't really find that convincing, and not a lot of replies in the published work. I'm a reader. I need to read it on paper. That's the best way I'm going to learn it. So I learn more through reading. So I would need to see the actual evidence in this test and then go from there. And again, there are a lot. My biggest thing when it comes to the flat Earth is we had a live stream of SpaceX launching a rocket into space, and we saw the Earth. The live stream is still online. You can see it. You can see the rocket going up, and you can see the Earth is round behind them. So that's going to be a big problem for me, thinking the Earth is flat when I can watch a video of the live stream actually happening. And sure, that could be a conspiracy, but I mean, it gets very ad hoc after that.
Next question. Thank you, Benjamin, for the super chat. That's for more of a statement than a question. Gregory A. Boyd's book, actually called Inspired Imperfection, How the Bible's Problems Enhance Its Divine Authority.
All right, yeah, I'll check that out. Thanks for the recommendation.
Right. Another super chat from Tristan. Thank you so much for the super chat. What's the best way to debate hyper skeptics like Matt Dillahunty? It seems easy to deny evidence with stuff like claims aren't evidence, etc.
Well, it's easy to point out claims are evidence. If it's called eyewitness testimony, it's even used in a court of law. And if they claim something, it is evidence. If I claimed there is a glass on my table, I have given you testimony there is a glass on my table. That's evidence. In fact, that's how most studies work. How do you know the COVID-19 vaccine works? Well, scientists have claimed it. Well, don't they have evidence? Yeah, they've done tests, but you have to trust their claims. You have to trust that they actually use test subjects and they're not lying and making things up, and it's not all a big conspiracy. Claims are evidence. So the best way to deal with skeptics like Matt Dillahunty is three simple words: I don't care. When they say they're not convinced, or they know that's not enough evidence to convince them, my always reply, and as I did in my debates with him, I said, well, I don't care. Here's the data. Here's what I'm saying is the best explanation. If you want to say I'm wrong, offer a better explanation. Just you not being convinced is not evidence. And claims are not evidence, Matt. So just because you're claiming you're not convinced, that's not actually evidence that my inference is wrong. So that's how I would deal with those kind of people. Just, I don't care if they're hyper skeptics. My first debate with Matt Dillahunty, I kept saying, I don't care that you're not convinced by this data. This is the actual data, and I'm going to follow the evidence. I don't really care if you're skeptical of it.
Next question. Tough love philosophy. Are the scholars at is Genesis history credible?
I don't know. I've not watched a lot of that, and I've not checked down a lot of that, so I apologize. I mean, it's really easy to do. Just look up the names, look up their credentials, and go from there. Again, there are young Earth creationists that do have good credentials. I'm not going to deny it, but I'm going to focus on their arguments and the data they present.
Right. Next question coming at you. Thank you for the super chat, Dr. Sheev. I've been wondering this myself, but what do you think became of the souls of early humans, pre-Homo sapiens, when they passed on?
Yeah, I think they had a process, the ability to keep on soul building, Trent Doherty talks about in his book on animal suffering. I'll be talking about that in a video in June when I talk about animal suffering. So I think they had the ability to continue on in soul building. They just didn't have as much information as us, as where we are. So it's about how much revealed revelation. So Jesus says in John 9:41 and John 15:22 that if I had not come, they would not be guilty, but now that I've come, they have no excuse. So that kind of implies people are not condemned just because they have lack of information. Paul says something very similar in Romans 5:13, where there is no law, there is no sin. So I don't think they're necessarily condemned, but I don't think they're necessarily sent to heaven either. They would just continue on in soul building after, and could either work towards God or work away from God.
All right. Next question. Theo's coming for you. Can you please explain the danger of Hebrew roots?
Oh boy, yeah, because Hebrew roots basically says that we have to keep Old Testament laws like Sabbath and dietary laws and customs. The danger of it is that, well, it's just, for one thing, I think it's just completely contradictory of the New Testament. Uh, Basically, people in the Hebrew roots movement come up with all sorts of explanations to get around passages like Acts 10 or 1 Corinthians 8. And my point is, yeah, you can come up with an explanation for those, but you have to keep adding extra unnecessary assumptions on top of those, on top of those, on top of those. Where if I have one explanation to explain all of this, Christ fulfilled the law, he kept it perfectly for us, so we don't have to keep the Mosaic law anymore. And that can explain all those passages I'd bring up, or they to bring up to show that we don't have to keep Old Testament laws anymore. They have to come up with a different explanation for like Colossians 2, Acts 10, Romans 14, etc. Keep going on and on and on. So it gets very ad hoc. The dangers of it is you start to focus too much on rituals and not as much on Christ. The substance is Christ. I'm really wary of clinging too much to shadows, not to the actual substance. Now, if you think keeping the Mosaic law is going to get you closer to Christ, then you do it. Go for it. Just remember what the real focus is. I myself know that if I had to keep those, I'd probably become very Pharisaic or legalistic. That's why I'll probably never be Hebrew roots, because I'd focus too much on, I have to make sure I'm doing this, make sure I'm doing that. It would ruin my faith because I would focus more on rituals. That's just not the way my brain is going to work. I'm very happy I was born in the New Covenant period where I don't have to keep them. But if you are that kind of person, you think that would help you strengthen your relationship with Christ, go for it. I encourage it. But just remember the substance is Christ, and don't think that doing these rituals is what's really going to save you.
All right. Next, thank you for the super chat. Did Adam's sin directly affect the POGs? What happened to them?
POGs.
I'm not totally familiar
What
with
is
that
it?
either.
I feel like it's like I feel like it's like a video game term. Like I feel like I've heard it in like some sort of thing. I don't know. I would need clarification. I apologize. Uh, Maybe he's referring to the people around him. So Adam was the first priest who failed. Jesus is the priest who succeeded. Adam's sin meant that humanity's representative or creation's representative for God failed, and therefore all that were in Adam failed with him, whereas in all that are grafted into Christ succeed with him. So think of Adam's priestly nature or priestly role compared to Jesus's priestly role. Same kind of thing. Just Adam failed, and all of creation would have failed with him because he was a representative who failed. Luckily, we are in Christ now, if you want to be, and you don't have to be Adam. So Adam represents him like Christ represents us before the Father.
All right. Thank you for the super chat, Paul. Appreciate it. Giving back for the countless times I've listened. Carry on.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. Thank you for the super chat. How should Christians approach other spiritual ideas? The law of attraction, chakras, auras, and other things alike, like extra biblical truths, I imagine. There are extra biblical truths, I imagine.
So there's a great book called History of Medieval Europe, The History of Medieval Worlds that I read years ago. And he pointed out that the early church during the 400s, 500s, when they heard about this supernatural stuff, they just said, well, that's just goes against God's natural laws. Therefore, we want to see evidence that it actually is. So same thing. Show me some scientific evidence. If it goes against God's natural laws, I want to see the evidence for that kind of stuff. I don't think those things are actually real unless, future science proves they're real. So the early church said, well, God set up natural laws. We're not going to believe these other supernatural events unless you can show us evidence for them. So same basic logic.
All right. All right. Thank you for the super chat. Any object that interacts with a wave function or when info is preserved will cause collapse. How do we know CCC is tuned and it's not just info preserved?
So CCC is consciousness causes collapse. That orthodox interpretation I hold to. Check out my video, The Measurement Problem, where I show, interaction causes collapse, but what caused the collapse of the thing that interacted and what collapsed that? Maximilian Schlauhauser, he's a physicist. He wrote a 30-page paper on interaction and decoherence. He points out interaction and decoherence is not an interpretation of quantum mechanics. It's just merely an extension of what we know with regards to the other interpretations. You cannot use interaction to challenge the orthodox interpretation because it's just an extension of it. We would expect interaction to cause collapse on these types of things. But this goes back to John von Neumann. What causes ultimate collapse? What was the first thing that caused collapse? It can't be something with a wave function because there has to be something outside that does not have a wave function. And he argued it was consciousness. Henry Stapp has carried that torch on, and those are the two I follow. You can also check out the book The Quantum Enigma by Bruce Rosenblum and Fred Kuttner.
Another super chat, Theo. Please explain the importance of the quote-unquote I am name.
Oh, so the importance of the I am name is very important because God is basically saying that he is timeless. He simply is. I talk about it in my video, Israel's Revolutionary Monotheism, which I think is one of my most important videos I've ever made. So check that out. Basically, it's the I am name. It's saying I just simply am. I did not come into existence. I'm not going to go out. I am. God is saying I am. I am now. I am in the past. I am in the future. I just simply I am. Time does not affect me.
Showing some more love, showering you some love. Thank you for thanks, love your channel. Appreciate you, Patrick.
Thank you.
All right. There he is. I've been told that if after presented with a case for Catholicism, I reject converting, that is a moral sin and I can't be saved. Is this true?
No, I don't think so. And I think Greek Orthodox, Catholics, and Protestants and evangelicals are all Christians. I don't think Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses are because they deny central things like the Trinity. Remember, we're saved by grace. It's the redemptive work of Christ. As long as we are in Christ, we are saved. It's not about special knowledge. It's not about special rituals. We are saved by grace through faith in Christ, and that's how you are saved. I'm very wary of trying to say you're saved by these sorts of works or these sorts of special knowledge type thing because it's very close to saying something you don't want to say.
Next question. Thank you, Carmel, for the super chat. Can you give an elevated speech on why Christianity is true?
Yeah, so we have things like we have evidence for God's existence in terms of objective morality, the beginning of the universe, fine-tuning of the universe. This all points to there being a God. Now, when it comes to Christianity, if you look at the archaeological record, the Bible is going to align the most with what we find in the past. Not necessarily on the young Earth model, but I mean on better models like Kenneth Kitchen's model, for example, in terms of biblical dating. But of course, then you come to the resurrection, and there is even Antony Flew said it's the one miracle in history that we seem to have more evidence for than anything else, any other miracle claim. And so there are no good naturalistic explanations for how the early church got started, why they claimed Jesus rose from the dead, and why they were willing to die and were persecuted for it. The best evidence is that God rose Jesus from the dead when you start to dive into a lot of the evidence for the resurrection. And naturalistic explanations get very ad hoc and multiply assumptions beyond necessity, or entities beyond necessity.
All right, next question. John Buck, appreciate you. Is Clay Jones' theodicy basically? Is Clay Jones' theodicy basically there is no evil because there are no good people? What about babies that are harmed?
No, he doesn't say. It's a lot more complex and nuanced than that. And babies are harmed by bad people that are acting on their free will, unfortunately. We don't say, I mean, we would say that animals get harmed by bad people. We just say that God has allowed freedom and that's going to create an imperfect world. And so because there's an imperfect world, bad things are going to happen to innocent people that don't necessarily deserve it. Clay Jones is basically pointing out that there's something so bad in the human soul that Christ needs to come and save. And that freedom is still going to act out, and it's still going to cause bad things to happen to people that probably don't deserve those things in a very layman sense of them being innocent and not deserving it. He does talk about the age of accountability. He is a proponent of that. So that's one thing to note as well. He's not saying that babies have bad things happen to them because they deserve it because they're born sinners. He's saying humanity has picked the world. Humanity as a whole has picked the world that we live in because we have chosen this path. And because of that, we're going to have some horrible consequences where people that would be innocent are going to suffer and experience pain. But of course, God offers a way out. God is going to make everything right. And I'm going to talk about that more in my upcoming video, the argument from, or addressing the argument from suffering. I already talked about a little bit my argument on the problem from evil, but I'll talk about it more in the argument from suffering.
Right. Another question. What are your thoughts on marrying an unbeliever as a Christian? Does it matter if she's is moral, or is her faith the only thing matters to look after?
Well, I mean, for a Christian, the center of your life needs to be Christ, and yet you want to bring someone into that who's not going to have Christ at the center. It's going to have some problems. People talk about getting married to someone on the opposite end of the political spectrum, and they can't. They have problems. So you got to think about what you're doing there. You're bringing someone into that relationship, and they cannot commit that their life needs to be about Christ. The Christian, when you get married, you become one flesh in that sense, that you are going to function as if you're one flesh. And yet, the one member of that one flesh cannot agree that what needs to be the center of Christ, and that can create some problems. Sorry, my neck needs cracked. That's why I keep doing this.
All right, that's all right. Understandable, Michael. And Michael, do you think Christianity is above politics? And do you think it's bad to tell someone you aren't a Christian if you vote Democrat?
Absolutely. If you don't vote for God Emperor Trump, you're going. No, I'm kidding. Um, uh, yeah, no, there are plenty of Christians that are Democrat, and that is fine. It's just a disagreement with regards to politics. Politics should not be the center of the Christian worldview. Um, we got to remember what's really important here. So, no, I don't think it's bad to vote Democrat. Um, I may disagree with some of the things you're doing, but I mean, I'm not going to say that it's bad. Of course, for the Christian, the reason why I say that is because, of course, pro-life. But I mean, the person voting Democrat can make the case that a lot of Republicans haven't really done a lot of pro-life things when they get in power. So why vote for them? I mean, Bush didn't really do a lot. So, they could have banned it several ages past, and they haven't. So you can make that case. But no, I don't think politics should be the center, and I think it's okay to disagree on that and still be a Christian. So I wouldn't really worry about that. So I think there's plenty of Christian brothers and sisters I have that are Democrats, and that's fine. There are plenty of Christians I know that are Republicans, and I'd say both are wrong. They're just both wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong.
All right. We have about 7 minutes left. We're going to 7:30, everyone. We have about 7 minutes left, and we are trying to blast through these super chats. So thank you so much for your support. We're going to keep going until we can get as many as we can within the next 7 minutes. All right. Next question we have coming from Caleb. How do you respond to the argument, I cannot detect God with my senses and he hasn't appeared to me, hence I lack belief in his existence?
Well, I mean, we don't argue that you have to believe in God because he appeared to you. The Bible doesn't. The Bible says to build on the evidence that God has given you. And we believe in a lot of things that we can't see, like consciousness, quarks. We have to infer they exist from experiments. We can't actually see them. So I wouldn't discount quarks just because I can't see them, just like I wouldn't discount God because I just can't see him. It's about what the evidence points us to.
Next question. In light of your quantum brain videos, what do you think happens to our souls when we sleep? What are dreams? Is astral projection legit? What about DMT?
I'm gonna let Marlon take this one. I'm kidding. What happens when we sleep? Well, I mean, your brain is just resting and your consciousness is just, letting the material aspect of you rest. Check out Irreducible Mind where I talk about that. I don't think consciousness goes away. I just think the availability for conscious to experience the physical reality goes away. I don't think astral projection is legit. DMT is a very interesting story. There might be something there. I think it might open you. It has the potential to open you to demons. Let's just say that. Some researchers, even like Rick Strassman, think you're actually communicating with immaterial beings. That's something I need to look more into. It could be legit, but I want to read more on that before I go down that road. I think dreams are just information of the brain running wild. You're learning more about your subconscious and more about yourself in those type of situations.
All right. Super chat for Andrew. Thank you. Have you read R. Carrier's book, Best Worst Parts?
Yeah, I've read about half of it. I need to finish back up. Worst parts, when he mentions that the ascension of Isaiah does mention a brief sojourn to earth, but it's not that important. No, it is important because it debunks your whole theory that Jesus doesn't go to earth in the ascension of Isaiah, because he does. It's very clear. He also brings up Anana at one point, and and again, I just disagree with how he interprets and uses Bayes' theorem. I don't think that's what Bayes' theorem is for, and I'm very skeptical of any proponent who uses Bayes' theorem to try to prove a historical fact or argue for a historical fact.
All right, here's a recommendation for you. Hey, Michael, can you please read The Resurrection, A Critical Inquiry? I heard his best book against the resurrection.
I think I already have. I think I actually have. Oh no, Michael J. Alter. No, I haven't. No, that is something I have to get to. It's just a very big book, and like I've been on other topics for so long, I need to eventually circle back to the resurrection. My now policy now is, after I was on the Gospel Truth debating with Jim Majors, I'm not debating resurrection anymore if they don't accept there was an empty tomb, or that Jesus was buried. So let's just debate if Jesus was buried. If you can't get past the idea that Jesus was buried, there's no point in debating the resurrection. So that's my new policy on resurrection debates. If they're not going to accept that Jesus was buried, what's the point?
Well, Mike, if you want to do videos responding to Hinduism, then I may be able to help. I've been studying Hinduism for years. I can message you on Patreon.
Yeah. I mean, but it's not going to happen anytime soon, to be honest. I got so much. I want to get the Old Testament done. There's a lot of stuff in there that people use in the Old Testament to reject Christianity, and I got to address that first. That's more important. But yeah, maybe down the road in a couple of years we can do that. That'd be really helpful.
Shannon Q showed up. Is Mike even your real name?
She's a So in Ken Hoven's response, for anyone who doesn't know, he's going, "So we're going to respond to this, Michael Jones, if that is your real name." And I was like, "Oh God, this is the best." But he caught me. My name is not Michael Jones. It's Beelzebub Barak Lucifer.
Oh
It's
man.
really the case. Yeah, thank you for the super chat, Shannon. I appreciate it. Yeah, that was the funniest response I've ever gotten, and I cannot wait for next week. It's gonna be great. But yeah, earlier in the talk, I did respond to Ken Hoven's arguments because they were god awful. He didn't even read Genesis 12, which was my favorite part, and loved his reply with regards to Genesis 8. Well, maybe the mountains went back under the water in verse 5 and then came back up later. Oh my gosh, wow. You just coming up with all sorts of fun little explanations for us there.
All right. Some more support. Just want to send some monies. Thank you for the super chat, AC.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate it. And all the money we get tonight, I'm going to take and divide it over 12. So disperse it for budget needs for the next 12 months starting in January. So we will just disperse it all out, and anyone can still donate through Patreon or PayPal on my website, and I will disperse everything over the next 12 months.
Great. Thank you, Emmanuel, for the super chat. You are the reason I believe evolution is okay. My question is, are we commanded to be pacifists? Is it a sin to fight back? My church says it is. I can seem to argue against them without using other sources than the Bible.
No, I think we are called to defend the innocent and the helpless, defend the widows and the orphans. I mean, honestly, if you saw a bunch of teenagers beating up a kid, you better run in and do something. I mean, you're not just, I'm a pacifist, I have to let it go. No, get in there. Sometimes you have to fight. If someone came in my house, I have guns. I would shoot them to protect my daughter and wife. I would do anything to protect them. I'm not going to just be a pacifist there. We have to defend the helpless and the weak, and sometimes that encourages fighting. Could you imagine a world where America was pacifist during World War II? That would have been horrible, with Hitler running around and the Japanese running around. Think of the bad things that could have happened there. No, sometimes we have to go out and fight evil. It's not something we necessarily want to do. I think the early church was pacifist because they had no choice. They were up against Rome, for crying. What are you going to do? What are you going to do against Rome? I mean, during that age, you're screwed. So a lot of them were called to be martyrs, and there was nothing they could. And if you get in that situation where you can't fight back, then yeah, you will be a martyr. But still, sometimes you got to fight back. Don't be Christian does not mean doormat.
All right. And this is our final super chat of the night. Final question of the night. All right. Gregory, we got to you, man. I know you was worried. We got to you. Are aliens interdimensional beings rather than extraterrestrial? Taking the accounts are true, would they be demonic in nature?
I mean, yeah, I've heard other people talk about that. Again, I don't know that much on that. I mean, it's possible. I mean, I know there are Christians that think Satan is some sort of interdimensional being, but I mean, we can't really say. I mean, honestly, why not both? I mean, there probably could be aliens on other planets. There could be other universes that we would say they're interdimensional beings there. I mean, like, why not? But this is all speculative at this point. It's fun to talk about speculative things as long as we know these are speculative. I think it could be the case for Satan, but I mean, if that's the kind of thing you talk about it over a glass of whiskey at a bar late at night, and you'd be like, yeah, it's possible. But I mean, right now, who knows? If the DMT research is actually true, again, I need to look more into that. It would be a case for the interdimensional type things, maybe. But again, we're not really sure what's going on there. I need to look more into that. I need to look, but I mean, all the data on this is going to be limited regardless. So I got to be honest and say, yeah, it's fun to speculate about some of these things, but at the end of the day, it's not a hill worth dying on, defending or uh, supporting necessarily at this point.
All right, that concludes this AMA IP's first ever AMA live Q&A. All right, you have any final words, Mike, before we sign off this thing?
No, thanks for everybody coming. If you guys want to come to the private Q&A, that's for donors this Saturday. Donors can ask me anything they want, and it's not super chat enabled. It's just I'll go through all the questions. So I appreciate Marlon for helping me out with this. It was a huge help because I didn't know I was going to do this on my own. So please check out his channel and subscribe. He's got a lot of good debates coming up with between various people, and I'll probably be on there again, hopefully this summer, for some more debates and whatnot. But yeah, a lot of good things coming up. I have some videos on archaeology coming on after the new year. Abraham, camels, Sodom and Gomorrah, the Genesis Philistines as well. And then I'm going to do a video on Quirinius in after the Exodus documentary, a whole 40-minute video on Quirinius and the census. So a lot of good things coming up. And thanks everybody. Last super chat. I don't know how much we made tonight. I appreciate all of it. It's going to be divided up. But thank you everyone who donated and helps us out. You can still donate through Patreon or PayPal.
All right, all right. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing to what Michael and Inspiring Philosophy is doing in 2021. We thank you, and we are signing off. May God bless you, and may God keep you. Thank you.